The emergency council chamber buzzed with panic as delegates from 47 species argued over their impending extinction. Rylith watched the chaos unfold and felt his hope dying alongside his civilization. The Virin swarm had consumed 17 star systems in 3 months, and nothing could stop them. Conventional weapons barely scratched their bioships, while they reproduced faster than anyone could kill them. Entire worlds had gone silent as the organic tide swept through sector after sector. The Pelarian ambassador slammed his appendage against the table, demanding immediate evacuation of all core worlds. The Thalric representative shouted back that running would only delay the inevitable. Smaller species sat in terrified silence, knowing their homeworlds would be consumed first. Rylith stood slowly, and the room gradually quieted. Everyone knew what he was about to propose, and many already hated him for it. "We must ask the humans for help." His voice carried across the chamber like a death sentence. Immediate uproar followed as delegates screamed objections. Humans were traders and engineers, not warriors. They had only joined the Galactic Council 50 years ago and kept mostly to themselves. Their military capabilities remained largely unknown because they never participated in council conflicts. Asking them seemed like begging children to fight adult battles. But Rylith had studied humanity carefully during his years as liaison to their embassy. He had seen things in their history files that terrified and fascinated him. Humans had spent 10,000 years fighting each other with constantly evolving weapons and tactics. They had split atoms and poisoned atmospheres and burned continents. They had nearly driven themselves extinct multiple times before finally achieving peace. What if that violent past could save the galaxy now? The vote passed by the narrowest margin in council history. Rylith would lead a delegation to Sol System and plead for military assistance. His ship departed the next day, carrying the weight of billions of lives. The journey took 2 weeks through established jump routes. As they approached human space, Rylith felt his stomach tighten with anxiety. What if the humans refused? What if they lacked the strength? What if this was their last hope dying? The sensors began detecting energy signatures long before they reached Earth, thousands of them scattered throughout the system like stars. Rylith's pilot checked the readings 3 times, certain they were malfunctioning. But no, the signatures were real. Humanity had fortified their home system beyond anything the Council considered reasonable. Every moon held weapon platforms, every asteroid belt hid patrol vessels. The third planet's moon was covered in construction facilities. A communication arrived in perfect galactic standard. "Delegation vessel, you are entering Terran defense space. State your purpose and transmit diplomatic credentials." Rylith sent the authorization codes and explained their desperate need. Silence followed for exactly 30 seconds before the response came. "You are cleared to approach Earth orbit. Admiral Hayes will meet with you in 2 hours. Welcome to Sol System." The meeting took place aboard a space station that dwarfed anything in Council space. Admiral Patricia Hayes was a tall woman with gray hair and eyes that had seen too much. She listened without interruption as Rylith explained the swarm threat. He showed recordings of consumed worlds and desperate battles. He presented casualty figures that made his voice shake. Finally, he asked directly, "Will humanity help us?" Hayes studied him for a long moment before responding. "We've been tracking the swarm for 6 weeks. Our intelligence division has been analyzing their tactics and biology. We know they reproduce through queen vessels and operate on hierarchical command structures. We know they're vulnerable to hard radiation and high-velocity kinetics. We know how to kill them." She paused. "The question isn't whether we'll help, it's whether you're prepared for how we fight." Rylith felt confused. "I don't understand. What do you mean?" Hayes activated a holographic display showing the lunar shipyards. Rylith's breath caught as thousands of vessels appeared in the projection. Frigates and destroyers and cruisers and massive dreadnoughts. Each one bristling with weapons that violated multiple council conventions on acceptable warfare. Nuclear missiles and railguns and electromagnetic pulse generators. Kinetic bombardment systems capable of cracking planets. "Humanity spent 3 centuries preparing for a war we hoped would never come," Hayes explained. "We studied every conflict in our history and built a military capable of winning them all simultaneously. We designed weapons to counter every possible threat. We created doctrines. For total warfare, she looked directly at Rylith. When humans fight, we don't fight to contain or negotiate. We fight to eliminate the threat permanently. Rylith felt his legs weaken. How many ships can you send? Hayes smiled without humor. First Fleet is already preparing to deploy, 500 vessels fully armed and crewed. Second Fleet will follow within 2 weeks with another 800. We can have 3,000 warships in combat zones within 60 days if needed. The Galactic Council has been fighting the swarm for months with minimal success. Humanity will end this war in less than half that time. The confidence in her voice wasn't arrogance. It was certainty born from millennia of perfecting the art of organized violence. Rylith realized the galaxy had been trying to fight the swarm with one hand, while humanity had been sharpening both into fists. They weren't just willing to help. They were eager to prove themselves. Earth had joined a peaceful civilization but never forgot how to wage war. "When can you leave?" Rylith asked quietly. Hayes checked her datapad. "First Fleet launches in 18 hours. Your ship will travel with us back to contested space. I want you and your team embedded with my vessels so we can coordinate with Council forces. You're about to see something no other species has witnessed. Humanity at total war." She stood. "Go rest. Prepare yourselves. Tomorrow we begin taking your galaxy back from the swarm." Rylith returned to his ship in a daze. His crew asked what happened, and he struggled to explain. Humanity hadn't just agreed to help. They had already prepared an overwhelming response. The galaxy had called for assistance, and Earth answered with a legendary fleet. As he watched human warships beginning to gather in formation outside his viewport, he understood something profound. Humanity's peaceful centuries weren't weakness. They were patience, and that patience had just run out. Vacuum surrounded the human fleet like an ocean of darkness as 500 warships accelerated toward the war zone. Rylith stood on the bridge of the indomitable, watching crew members work with mechanical efficiency. Nobody shouted or panicked. Orders were given quietly and executed instantly. This was a machine built for one purpose, and it hummed with deadly intent. Lieutenant Commander Rachel Sterling approached him carrying a datapad. "Ambassador Rylith, the Admiral wants. You familiar with our combat doctrine before we engage the swarm?" She gestured toward a tactical display. "Council forces have been fighting defensively, trying to minimize casualties and protect territory. Humanity learned centuries ago that defensive wars are wars of attrition. We don't fight like that anymore." Rylith studied the display showing various human conflicts throughout history, wars fought on land and sea and air and eventually space. Every environment mastered, every weapon perfected. "Your species has been at peace for 300 years, he said. "How do you maintain such military knowledge?" Sterling smiled grimly. "Peace doesn't mean forgetting how to fight. It means being so prepared for war that nobody dares start one. Every human child studies military history. We remember what happens when we're not ready." She pulled up footage of ancient wars, cities burning, populations displaced, civilizations collapsing. "We swore never to be victims again, and we extended that promise to include our allies." The journey took 3 weeks at maximum sustainable speed. During that time, Rylith learned more about human warfare than his entire military academy education had taught him. Humans didn't just fight with weapons. They fought with psychology and logistics and information warfare. They studied their enemies and exploited every weakness. They planned for every contingency and adapted when plans failed. War wasn't an unfortunate necessity for humanity. It was a science they had perfected through bloody experience. Admiral Hayes called daily briefings with her command staff and the alien delegation. She explained that the swarm operated predictably. Overwhelming numbers compensated for individual weakness. Queen vessels directed lesser organisms through biological signals. Eliminate the queens and the swarm would collapse. But reaching the queens meant fighting through millions of organisms designed to protect them. Council tactics focused on destroying drones in hopes of reducing numbers, Hayes explained during one briefing. "That's like trying to empty an ocean with a bucket. The swarm reproduces faster than you can kill them. Instead, we'll strike at their command structure, cut off the head and the body dies, precision over quantity, quality over coverage." Rylith asked the obvious question, What about casualties? Queen vessels are protected by thousands of organisms. The losses will be significant. Hayes met his eyes without flinching. War has costs, Ambassador. Humans learned that lesson in blood across 10 millennia. We don't throw lives away carelessly, but we understand that sometimes sacrifice is necessary to achieve victory. A few hundred dying quickly is more merciful than millions dying slowly. She paused. Council forces tried to save everyone and ended up saving no one. Sometimes the moral choice is the brutal one. They reached the border of contested space on schedule. A massive refugee convoy was under attack by swarm scouts, hundreds of civilian vessels trying to escape while bioships tore through their escorts. Council defenders were losing badly. Their weapons barely slowed the organic tide. Rylith watched in horror as another transport exploded, scattering debris and bodies into the void. Hayes didn't hesitate. All ships combat formation Delta, fast response groups break and engage. Priority targets are swarm attackers. Secondary priority is convoy protection, weapons free. The orders went out instantly. Human destroyers and frigates accelerated to attack speed. Their crews had trained for exactly this scenario. The engagement lasted 17 minutes. Human railguns punched through swarm bioships like paper. Nuclear-tipped missiles eliminated entire clusters. Point defense systems shot down every organism that got close enough to threaten human vessels. The aliens fought with desperate ferocity, but human weapons were designed specifically to counter organic targets. High-velocity penetrators didn't care about regeneration. Hard radiation killed at the cellular level. Thermal bloom from nuclear detonations sterilized vast areas of space. Rylith watched the tactical display in stunned silence. Green icons representing human ships moved with coordinated precision. Red icons representing swarm organisms vanished in clusters. The refugees were saved. The attackers were eliminated. Human casualties were 0. Damaged ships were 3, and all remained combat-capable. He had just witnessed something impossible by Council standards, a complete victory with minimal cost. A transmission came from the rescued convoy. The Council captain's voice shook with emotion. "Human fleet, this is Captain Duvak of the Transport Group Mercy 7. How did you do that? We've been losing fights like this for months. You made it look easy." Hayes responded personally, "Captain, Duvak humanity has been fighting for survival since we climbed down from trees. We learned every lesson the hard way. Now we're sharing those lessons with species who don't have time to learn them slowly. Get your people to safety. We'll make sure nothing follows you." Long-range sensors detected something massive ahead. 3 Queen vessels surrounded by over 10,000 support organisms. This was the force that had destroyed a Council battle group last week. Hayes studied the readings for exactly 12 seconds before issuing orders. All ships prepare for combat. Target priorities are Queen vessels. Everything else is secondary. This is what we came for. Show them what human warfare looks like. The crew responded with calm acknowledgement. No fear, no hesitation, just professionals doing what they were trained for. Rylith realized that humanity hadn't just built a powerful military. They had created a culture where ordinary people could face overwhelming odds without breaking. Every human on this ship knew they might die in the next hours. None of them seemed bothered by that knowledge. They had a job to do, and death was simply another obstacle to overcome. "Ambassador," Hayes said quietly, "you asked the Galactic Council to summon humanity. You're about to see what that means. We don't fight wars, we end them." She turned to her tactical officer. "All ships advance, engage at will. Let's remind the galaxy why humans survived when so many species didn't." The Indomitable accelerated toward the enemy formation, and 500 warships followed. Rylith gripped the railing and wondered if he had unleashed something the galaxy wasn't prepared for. Space itself seemed to hold its breath as 2 massive forces accelerated toward collision. The swarm formation detected the human fleet and responded exactly as their biology dictated. Attack the threat with overwhelming numbers. Eliminate resistance through sheer mass. They had used this strategy successfully against every Council species, but humans had studied that strategy and built counters for it. Admiral Hayes watched the tactical display with the calm of someone who had rehearsed this moment 1,000 times. Weapons range in 90 seconds. All batteries prepare firing solutions. Fighter wings stand by for launch. Point defense systems active. Her voice carried no stress, just professional competence honed through decades of training. Around her, the bridge crew worked their stations with the same focused intensity. The swarm didn't wait. At maximum range, their bioships began launching organic projectiles, living missiles designed to burrow into enemy vessels and consume them from within. Council shields could slow these weapons but not stop them. Human shields were backed up by something the Council had never considered: automated point defense turrets that tracked and eliminated incoming threats with computer-guided precision. Thousands of small projectiles met the organic missiles and neutralized them. Nothing reached the human formation. "Open fire," Hayes ordered. The human fleet responded with synchronized devastation. Long-range nuclear missiles streaked across the void, trailing exhaust plumes. Their targeting systems had been programmed with swarm biology data. Each warhead was configured for maximum radiation output. The weapons were designed specifically to kill organic matter at the molecular level. Council species considered nuclear weapons barbaric and banned their use. Humanity considered them effective and used them liberally. The first wave of missiles reached the swarm formation and detonated in a cascade of artificial suns. Radiation washed over bioships that had evolved no defense against it. Cellular structures broke down. Organic armor crumbled. Hundreds of organisms died instantly while thousands more suffered critical damage. The swarm pressed forward anyway. Their programming didn't include retreat. Rylith gripped the railing as the fleets closed to medium range. Human railguns began firing with methodical precision. Tungsten penetrators accelerated to devastating velocities. Each round carried kinetic energy equivalent to small nuclear weapons. The bioship's regenerative abilities meant nothing against physics. Metal moving fast enough simply punched through organic matter regardless of how quickly it could heal. One shot, one kill. The efficiency was terrifying. The swarm adapted as much as their biology allowed. They began swarming tactics, surrounding individual human vessels to overwhelm their defenses through sheer numbers. It was the strategy that had destroyed Council fleets. But human ships weren't designed like Council vessels. They were built to take punishment and keep fighting. Armored hulls absorbed impacts. Redundant systems maintained functionality even with severe damage, and most importantly, defense systems never stopped firing. Fighter squadrons launched from human carriers and joined the battle. Small craft moving with incredible agility. Pilots trained since childhood for exactly this type of combat. They flew in coordinated wings supporting each other, covering blind spots, exploiting openings. Their weapons were smaller than capital ship armaments but no less deadly. Precision plasma cutters that could sever queen vessels from their support organisms. Missiles designed to penetrate deep before detonating. Every weapon optimized for the mission. 3 queen vessels attempted to retreat to the rear of their formation. Hayes identified them immediately. Battle Group Serpent break formation and engage priority targets. All other units maintain pressure on the main force. Don't let anything escape. 6 heavy cruisers and 2 dreadnoughts accelerated toward the queens. The swarm threw thousands of organisms at them in desperate defense. It wasn't enough. Human vessels absorbed damage that would have destroyed Council ships. Armor breached but held. Shields failed and regenerated. Crew compartments sealed off compromised sections. Damage control teams worked with frantic efficiency. Every human had trained for casualties. Everyone knew their backup role. Ships continued fighting even when critically damaged because surrendering wasn't programmed into human military doctrine. The first queen died to concentrated railgun fire, 3 dreadnoughts firing simultaneously. The massive organism's biology couldn't handle that much kinetic energy. It simply came apart. Hundreds of smaller organisms linked to that queen went silent. Biological signals cut off. They drifted without purpose until human weapons eliminated them. The second queen attempted emergency FTL jump. Human interdiction fields prevented it. The queen was trapped and knew it. Humans showed no mercy. Rylith watched the tactical display and felt something between awe and horror. This wasn't a battle. It was an execution. The swarm had faced opponents who fought cautiously, who valued every life, who hesitated before pulling triggers. Humans valued their own lives but understood that sometimes death was necessary to achieve victory. They didn't hesitate. They didn't compromise. They fought with the full weight of 10,000 years of military evolution behind every decision. The third queen made a desperate run at the indomitable. It accelerated to ramming speed, sacrificing all its support organisms. If it could destroy the human flagship, perhaps the fleet would withdraw. The attempt failed spectacularly. Point defense systems tracked the queen from 30 kilometers away. Railguns fired the moment it entered range. Missiles locked on and launched. The queen died 5 kilometers from impact. Its corpse drifted past the Indomitable's hull as human crews watched without emotion. They had seen worse. 4 hours after engagement began, the battle ended. 10,000 swarm organisms destroyed. 3 queen vessels eliminated. Scattered remnants fled into deep space pursued by human fighters. Those that escaped wouldn't survive long. Hayes had dispatched hunter-killer groups to track them down. Nothing would be allowed to reproduce or warn other swarm clusters. Human casualties were 47 dead, 3 ships with heavy damage, 12 needing moderate repairs. By Council standards, this was impossible. By human standards, it was acceptable. Rylith watched as rescue operations began. Every crew member's body was recovered. Humans didn't leave their dead behind. Families would receive remains. Proper funerals would be conducted. Even in victory, humans honored sacrifice. A transmission arrived from Council reinforcements. They had detected the battle from 2 systems away and rushed to assist. They arrived to find wreckage and human vessels conducting recovery operations. The Council commander's voice carried disbelief. "Human fleet, what happened here? We detected massive energy signatures. How did you eliminate an entire swarm formation in 4 hours?" Hayes responded with the same calm efficiency she had shown throughout the battle. "We fought to win, Council Commander. Humanity doesn't believe in acceptable losses or strategic withdrawals when facing existential threats. The swarm threatened species with extinction. We removed that threat. Permanently." She paused. "This is what Earth brings to the Alliance, the willingness to do what must be done, the capacity to see it through, and the weapons to make it happen." Rylith realized the galaxy was about to change forever. Humanity hadn't just won a battle. They had demonstrated a new way of waging war. Total commitment, overwhelming force, absolute victory. The Council had tried to fight humanely and lost. Humans fought brutally and won. The question wasn't whether humanity could save the galaxy anymore. It was whether the galaxy was ready for the methods humanity would use. News of First Fleet's victory spread across Galactic Council networks like wildfire. Species that had accepted their extinction suddenly had hope again. But hope came with questions. Admiral Hayes stood before the full Council assembly via secure holographic transmission. Around her appeared representatives from every member species. Their expressions ranged from grateful to terrified. Humanity had proven they could win. Now everyone wondered what that victory would cost. The Council's military coordinator spoke first. "Admiral Hayes, our intelligence confirms 19 active swarm clusters across 7 sectors. Our forces cannot contain them. We've lost 63 billion lives in 6 months." His voice cracked with exhaustion. "Can humanity truly eliminate this threat?" Hayes didn't sugarcoat her response. "Yes, but not with a single fleet operating independently. I need full access to your intelligence networks, complete authority to coordinate with Council forces, and 3 more fleets from Earth. This is now a galaxy-wide military campaign. We'll systematically eliminate every swarm presence in Council space. Give me 4 months and I'll give you victory." The chamber erupted in debate. Some species welcomed humanity's aggressive approach. Others worried about giving aliens such authority. The Pelarian delegates stood. "How do we know humanity won't use this power to dominate us after the swarm is defeated? You possess overwhelming military superiority. What prevents you from demanding tribute or territory?" Rylith surprised himself by standing. "I have fought alongside humans. I have seen them mourn their dead and honor their sacrifices. Humanity values freedom as much as any species here. They came when we called despite having no obligation. They fought and died for species they barely knew. That is not the behavior of conquerors." He looked at the Pelarian. "The real question is whether we're brave enough to accept help from those stronger than us." The vote passed with 79% approval. Hayes was granted unprecedented authority. Within hours, she transmitted orders to Sol system. Second Fleet would deploy immediately. Third and Fourth would follow as soon as crews completed training and ships finished construction. Humanity was mobilizing for total war, something they hadn't done in 3 centuries, and they moved with the efficiency of a civilization that never forgot how. Earth's response was overwhelming. Volunteer rates for military service increased by 400%. Humans who had never considered military careers suddenly felt called to serve. Ancient instincts awakened, the drive to protect, to defend, to ensure survival not just of their own species but of others who couldn't protect themselves. Shipyards went to maximum production. Civilian vessels were retrofitted for support roles. Entire industries shifted to wartime footing. Second Fleet departed Earth 10 days later. 800 warships under Admiral Carlos Rodriguez. He was younger than Hayes but carried the same cold competence. His ships moved through jump points with practiced precision, heading toward the core sectors where swarm infestation was worst. Council forces in those regions had been fighting desperate holding actions, losing slowly but inevitably. Rodriguez's arrival changed everything. First Fleet continued operations in the Outer Rim. Hayes divided her forces into hunter-killer groups that tracked down swarm clusters with methodical precision. Every engagement was studied, weaknesses exploited, tactics refined and shared across all human forces. The networked approach to warfare confused Council observers. Most species maintained separate military doctrines even within alliances. Humanity operated as a single organism. Information flowed instantly. Adaptations happened in real time. When one fleet discovered a swarm vulnerability, all fleets knew within hours. 3 weeks into the campaign, Rodriguez's forces engaged a major swarm concentration in the Crest sector. 5 queen vessels protected by thousands of support organisms. They had established a breeding ground on a dead world and were producing new organisms at exponential rates. Council forces had tried 3 times to dislodge them. Each attempt failed with heavy casualties. Rodriguez studied their mistakes and designed a different approach. His fleet didn't attack the breeding ground directly. Instead, they established a blockade. Nothing entered or left the system. Swarm organisms inside couldn't reproduce without resources from outside. Human vessels shot down every supply run, every scout, every organism that attempted to break through. The blockade was absolute, maintained by rotating shifts, enforced with ruthless efficiency. After 2 weeks, the swarm organisms began dying from resource starvation. Their biology required constant intake. Humans simply cut off that intake. When the swarm was weakened, Rodriguez struck. His fleet entered the system and eliminated the queens before the remaining organisms could mount effective defense. The breeding ground was sterilized with orbital bombardment. Nothing survived. Nothing escaped. Council observers noted that humans didn't just defeat enemies, they erased them, left no possibility of return, no chance for resurgence. But victory came with costs. 2 human destroyers were lost in the Hellion Nebula when a swarm ambush caught them during a scouting mission. 93 crew members died instantly. Another 100 were injured. Rescue vessels recovered survivors and bodies. Memorial services were broadcast across human space. Families of the fallen received full honors. Their sacrifices acknowledged publicly. Humanity mourned but didn't waver. If anything, casualties strengthened resolve. Rylith noticed something that confused him. Council species traditionally sought peace after significant losses, tried to minimize further casualties through negotiation or withdrawal. Humans reacted oppositely. Losses made them fight harder, become more determined, increase commitment rather than reduce it. He asked Sterling to explain this apparent contradiction. She thought for a moment before responding. Ambassador, when you lose people you care about, you have 2 choices: accept that loss and move on, or honor that loss by finishing what they started. Humans choose the second option. Our fallen deserve victory. Giving up would mean they died for nothing. So we fight harder to ensure their sacrifice achieves its purpose. It's how we process grief, by making it meaningful. 4 months into the campaign, humanity had eliminated 16 of 19 swarm clusters. Casualties approached 6,000 dead and 15,000 wounded across 3 fleets. Council forces contributed support, but the heavy fighting fell to human units. They had the doctrine, the weapons, the willingness to accept losses in pursuit of victory. Species that had been fighting defensively for months watched humans prosecute an offensive war with brutal efficiency. Intelligence discovered something troubling. The 3 remaining swarm clusters were converging, creating a supercluster in the darkness beyond sector, over 50 queen. Vessels and estimated 2 million organisms. This was likely the swarm's primary breeding ground, the source of all other infestations. Destroying it would end the war permanently, but the cost would be staggering, even by human standards. Hayes called a conference with her fellow admirals and senior council leadership. This is the swarm's last stand. They're concentrating everything in one location. We can end this war in a single battle, but it will be the largest space engagement in galactic history. Casualties will be significant. I need full commitment from every available human vessel and all council forces willing to participate. Rylith asked the question everyone was thinking. Admiral, how many will die in this assault? Hayes met his eyes without flinching. Thousands, maybe tens of thousands, but if we don't eliminate this supercluster, the war continues indefinitely. The swarm will rebuild, spread again, threaten more worlds, more species, causing millions of future casualties. She paused. Sometimes the moral choice is the one that costs lives now to save lives later. Humanity learned that lesson in blood. We're willing to pay that price again. The decision was made. All 3 human fleets would converge on the darkness beyond sector. They would assault the supercluster with everything they had, win or lose, do or die. Humanity would end the swarm threat permanently or die trying, and somehow that certainty was more terrifying than the alternative. 1,500 human warships gathered at Rally Point Terminus like predators assembling for a final hunt. 3 fleets merged into a single armada that represented humanity's complete military commitment. Admiral Hayes stood on the bridge of the Indomitable and felt the weight of command pressing down like a physical force. She was about to order thousands to their deaths. The burden never got easier regardless of how necessary the mission. The fleet spent 2 days in final preparations. Every system checked 3 times, every weapon loaded and tested, every crew member briefed on their role. Human military tradition included rituals before major battles. Chaplains conducted services for believers. Counselors met with those who needed support. Everyone was given time to record messages for families in case they didn't return. The fleet accepted its mortality with remarkable composure. Rylith walked through the Indomitable's corridors. Observing these rituals, he found young pilot named David Harris sitting in the pilot briefing room staring at his helmet. The human was barely 25 by galactic standard, fresh-faced and trying to hide his fear. Rylith approached carefully. "Are you frightened?" Harris looked up and managed a weak smile. "Terrified, actually. I keep thinking about everything that could go wrong, all the ways I could die out there, ejection failure, cockpit breach, direct hit." He paused. "But someone has to do this, might as well be me. My family has served in military roles for 6 generations. This is our tradition, our duty." Rylith sat beside him. "I have seen your species face death repeatedly during this campaign. You never run, never surrender. Where does this courage come from?" Harris thought for a moment. "I don't think it's courage, Ambassador. Courage implies not being afraid. We're all afraid. What we have is commitment, understanding that some things matter more than our individual survival. If we don't stop the swarm here today, millions die tomorrow, billions die next year. My fear doesn't compare to that responsibility." Admiral Hayes broadcast a fleet-wide message hours before the assault. Her image appeared on every screen throughout the Armada. "Warriors of Earth and allies of the Galactic Council, in a few hours we jump into the darkness beyond sector to face the largest swarm concentration ever recorded. Many of us will not return. Our names will join the honored dead whose sacrifice built human civilization. She paused. But those who do return will know they participated in the most important battle in galactic history. We fight not for conquest or glory. We fight to ensure species we've never met have futures worth living. That is humanity's promise. That is our purpose. The transmission ended. Nobody cheered. They simply returned to their duties with quiet determination. The Armada jumped together. 1,500 human vessels and 500 council ships. Space twisted and reality bent. They emerged into a nightmare. The supercluster filled every sensor. 2 million swarm organisms clustered around a massive organic structure. The prime hive, origin point of the entire infestation. It pulsed with biological energy coordinating the defense. Queen vessels surrounded it in protective layers. Smaller organisms filled the space between like living shields. Hayes transmitted attack. Order, all ships advance. Target priorities Alpha through Delta. Maintain formation discipline. Fighters launch when we reach combat range. This is what we train for. Show them what humanity brings. The fleet accelerated toward the enemy. Weapons charging, crews at battle stations. Death incoming from both directions. The swarm responded with overwhelming force. Organisms launched in waves that blackened space. Living missiles, bioprojectiles, clouds of acidic spores, everything their evolution had developed for survival. Human long-range weapons opened fire, nuclear missiles by the thousands, each one targeted for maximum effect. Explosions rippled through the swarm formation. Radiation washed over organic matter unprepared for such forces. But the swarm kept coming. The battle became grinding attrition. Human vessels advanced meter by meter, each paid for in damage and casualties. Shields failed under sustained assault, armor breached, crew compartments decompressed. But the fleet maintained momentum. Admiral Rodriguez's second fleet held the left flank, absorbing massive pressure. Admiral Chen's third fleet pushed the right, cutting off escape routes. Hayes's first fleet drove straight for the prime hive, unstoppable, inevitable. 6 hours into the engagement, the cruiser Defiant took catastrophic damage. A cluster of swarm organisms broke through its point defense and tore into the hull. Reactor containment failed. 300 crew members died in an instant. But their sacrifice allowed the battleship Vengeance to eliminate 2 queen vessels. Every death brought advantage. Every loss advanced the mission. Humanity's mathematics of war calculated that some lives could save many others. Fighter squadrons fought desperate battles in the gaps between capital ships. Pilots like David Harris flew with skill learned through years of training. They covered each other, exploited openings, died protecting their wingmates. Harris's squadron lost 3 pilots in 40 minutes. He felt each death like a physical blow, but kept flying, kept fighting, because stopping meant their deaths were meaningless. Human forces reached the prime hive's outer defenses after 8 hours of continuous combat. The structure was impossibly vast. Organic architecture spanning hundreds of kilometers. It pulsed with the biological signals coordinating millions of organisms. Hayes knew conventional weapons would take days to destroy it, days they didn't have. Casualties were mounting, ships were failing. She made the hardest decision of her career. Deploy kinetic impactors, authorization code Hayes Alpha 77. The order went out. 2 dreadnoughts began accelerating massive tungsten rods, relativistic kinetic weapons, the most destructive tool in humanity's arsenal. Objects moving at 90% light speed carried energy equivalent to nuclear weapons. Nothing could stop them, nothing could survive them. The swarm recognized the threat. Every organism converged on the launch vessels. They threw everything at the dreadnoughts trying to prevent the launch. 1 dreadnought was destroyed, 400 dead, but the second completed its mission. 6 tungsten rods accelerated past the point of return. The impactors struck with devastating force. The prime hive structure couldn't withstand kinetic energy delivered at such velocities. Massive sections broke apart. Queen vessels within died instantly. Biological signals ceased. Millions of organisms lost coordination simultaneously. Hayes ordered immediate exploitation. Human forces surged forward, eliminated confused enemies, pressed advantages, showed no mercy because mercy meant prolonging suffering. 14 hours after engagement began, the battle ended. The supercluster was destroyed. The prime hive eliminated. remaining swarm organisms scattered into deep space where human hunter groups would eliminate them over coming weeks. Victory was absolute, but the cost was staggering. 230 human ships destroyed, 18,000 dead, countless wounded. Council forces lost 80 vessels, 4,000 personnel. The fleet held position for 3 days conducting recovery operations. Every survivor rescued, every body retrieved. Humanity didn't abandon its fallen. Memorial services were broadcast across human space. 18,000 names read aloud, 18,000 lives honored. The galaxy watched and finally understood. Humans didn't fight without emotion, they fought despite it. They carried their dead home because that's what good people do. Rylith stood in the Indomitable's observation deck watching recovery vessels work. He had seen humanity wage total war, witnessed their capacity for calculated violence, but also saw how they mourned, how they honored sacrifice, how they treated even enemies with a certain respect. Humans were capable of terrible things, but chose to do them only when necessary, and that choice defined them. The damaged fleet limped back to Council space over 4 weeks. Human vessels held together by emergency repairs and crew determination. Yet they maintained formation. Military discipline endured beyond victory. As they passed through liberated systems, billions of grateful citizens watched. Some held vigils, others transmitted messages of thanks. The galaxy was learning what human sacrifice meant. The Galactic Council convened its first Grand Assembly in 2 centuries. 10,000 delegates from every member species gathered in the Great Chamber. They came to honor humanity's intervention and discuss the future. Admiral Hayes entered with her senior staff. All wore dress uniforms, all carried themselves with quiet dignity. They were warriors, not politicians, but duty called them here. The council speaker stood and the chamber fell silent. Admiral Hayes and warriors of Earth, you answered our desperate call when extinction threatened. You fought and died for species you barely knew. You asked nothing in return. Today we ask what humanity wants for its service. What payment would honor such sacrifice? Hayes stepped forward, her voice carried clearly across the vast chamber. The Galactic Council believes humanity deserves payment, that our service requires compensation. You're wrong. Murmurs spread through the delegates. Humans didn't fight for reward. We fought because species faced extinction and we could stop it. That's reason enough. That's always been reason enough. She activated a holographic display showing the 18,000 names of human dead. These warriors didn't die for profit. They died because that's what humans do when others need protection. It's how we're built, how we're raised, how we define ourselves. The names scrolled slowly, each one a life ended. What humanity wants is simple: formal alliance, mutual defense, open borders. We want to be part of this galaxy, not its conquerors. We want trade and cultural exchange and cooperation. We want our children to grow up knowing the stars are safe. Silence filled the chamber as delegates absorbed this. Most species would leverage such victory into demands for territory and tribute. Humanity wanted partnership. The vote was called. Should the Galactic Council accept Earth's proposed alliance? The result was unanimous approval, something that had never happened before. Humanity had earned not just respect but genuine affection. The Terran Defense Alliance was established that day. Formal partnership between humanity and all Council species. Trade agreements followed. Technology exchanges began. Human military doctrine would be studied and adapted. Council sciences would be shared with Earth. Colonies were authorized in previously restricted sectors. Humanity could finally expand beyond Sol system. The galaxy fundamentally changed. Peace backed by strength. Cooperation defended by those willing to fight. The following months saw rapid integration. Human culture spread across Council space. Music and literature and philosophy. Aliens were fascinated by humanity's contradictions. Incredible violence paired with profound compassion. The capacity to wage total war while treating enemies with dignity. It made no sense by Council standards, but somehow it worked. Humans built relationships based on mutual respect. They traded fairly. They helped those who needed it. They kept their promises. Rylith returned home to his world carrying memories that would define the rest of his life. He had witnessed humanity at war, seen their capacity for organized violence, but also seen how they honored their dead. how they treated allies, how they struggled with their own nature. He wrote a comprehensive report that became required reading at council military academies. His central thesis was simple. Humanity succeeded because they understood what council species refused to accept. Sometimes peace requires the capacity for overwhelming violence. Sometimes protecting the innocent means becoming monsters to fight worse monsters. Humans didn't enjoy this burden. They carried it so others wouldn't have to. That was the definition of heroism. 2 years after the war ended, the galaxy had transformed. Human-designed defense stations guarded critical sectors. Council species focused on science and culture while humans maintained vigilance. New species were discovered and welcomed. They joined a civilization that would protect them. The swarm was extinct. The last organisms eliminated by joint task forces. The threat was ended permanently. Human veterans struggled with what they had witnessed and done. Earth established counseling programs and support networks. Some adapted easily. Others spent years processing trauma. All were honored regardless of how they coped. Humanity understood that warriors carried scars beyond the physical. Admiral Hayes retired from active service, but advised both human and council militaries. She had proven that strength used in service of others was nobility, not tyranny. Admiral Rodriguez and Admiral Chen continued serving, commanding defense fleets that patrolled contested borders. They remained ready, always prepared, because humans learned that eternal vigilance was the price of peace. Third and fourth fleets rotated through sectors maintaining presence, showing potential threats that the galaxy was defended. Earth established the Fallen Memorial on Luna, 18,000 names etched in stone visible from the homeworld. Families visited regularly. Children learned about those who died protecting strangers. New generations understood sacrifice, understood duty, understood that sometimes the cost of doing right was measured in lives, but that cost was worth paying. Rylith visited Earth 5 years after the war. He came as formal ambassador from his people, a position created specifically to honor their relationship with humanity. He stood at the Fallen Memorial reading names, remembering faces, honoring those who saved his species. A young human cadet approached, offering to answer questions about those commemorated. Rylith asked what he had wondered since that first desperate meeting. Why were humans willing to die for species they barely knew? What drove such sacrifice? The cadet was quiet for a moment, then responded with the honesty that defined her species. Because nobody else could, because it needed doing, because that's what humans do. We see someone who needs help and we help. We see a threat to the innocent and we stop it. Cost doesn't matter, risk doesn't matter. What matters is doing what's right even when it's hard. She paused. That's not special to humans, that's just being decent. We just happen to have the weapons and training to make decency effective. Rylith looked up at Earth hanging in Luna's sky, the homeworld of a species that saved the galaxy not for glory but because it was necessary. He finally understood what made humans different, not their weapons or tactics or ships. Those were tools. What made humans special was their choice to use those tools in service of others, their willingness to stand between the innocent and the darkness regardless of cost. The galaxy had sought help desperately. Humanity answered with legendary fleet and 18,000 lives. They asked nothing in return. They wanted only partnership and peace. They proved that the most human trait wasn't violence or innovation. It was the willingness to sacrifice for others, to fight not for conquest but for protection. And in doing so, they showed the galaxy what heroism truly meant.